Good afternoon, and thank you for coming back to join us. We appreciate your patience with us. I'm going to start right in. First on the list is going to be Diana Chihak, and after Diana, we're going to do Jesse Lenny.
Good afternoon. Welcome back. Thank you for being here. I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony today before the Public Financing Commission. I'm here today to highlight the transformative impact a strong public financing system will have on who can run in New York. My name is Diana Chihak, and I am the founder of Women Elect, a leadership development program based here in Buffalo with chapters across the state. It's for women who are considering running for office. Through these experiences with candidates, I have seen firsthand the challenges female candidates face for running for office. That is why I joined New York Lead, a group of over 80 business, civic, and philanthropic leaders who support the creation of a strong public financing system in New York. One of the major barriers that prevents women from running for office is difficulty fundraising. While 2018 was a record year for women, both as donors and candidates across the country, female candidates have historically struggled to raise as much as their male counterparts. This challenge is even greater for women of color. According to an analysis conducted by the Center for Responsive Politics, the average total funds raised by Black, Latinx, and Asian women running for Congress in the 2018 cycle were lower than the average total funds raised by white women running for Congress. These inequities are rooted in the longstanding exclusion of women from the wealthy networks that candidates traditionally tap to fund their campaigns. Women running for office instead rely more on small donors, and also many of whom are women. Many of the women who approach me about running for office are hesitant for a number of reasons. Chief among them is the insecurity they feel in being able to raise funds. After they throw their hat in the ring and start to fundraise, I've heard countless stories from women candidates and women fundraising professionals. They range in audacity from propositions that have been asked in exchange for larger donations to again and again having to prove that they have the strength for the race and the ability to win in a way that goes beyond what their male counterparts are expected to prove. And you may ask a fundamental question: why is it important to have more women in office? The easy answer is, of course, simply numerical. Women make up roughly 52% of the population, yet in the New York State Legislature, we have just achieved 30%. The Buffalo Common Council has not had a woman on the council since 2010. But a more accurate picture is told through a study that the Harvard Business Review released in February. For years, we have seen numerous studies showing that when women are represented in business and corporate world, profits are up to 15% higher than the industry average. The Harvard Business Review shows that this holds true in government as well. They looked at 183 countries throughout the world that had diverse populations and found that during the time from 1950 to the present day, those countries, when led by a woman, had an average of 5.4% GDP growth in the subsequent year as compared to a male at 1.1%. Women govern differently. We need a balance of gender and racial voices at the table to truly succeed in representation. At this point, they say it will take 100 years for us to gain parity in the U.S. Congress. There are concrete changes we can make to our campaign finance system to improve the current state of affairs. Small donor matching.
Thank you, Ms. Chihak. You tried.
You said it, yeah.
Thank you so much.
We did read it, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jesse Lenny, and then after that, Jumira Alcobe.
Hello, my name is Jesse Lenny. Thank you everyone for staying. I'm going to try to be brief. I have two written statements I'd like to read if I have time from folks who were working and couldn't make it, because we don't actually get patronage jobs. So I joined the party about 15 years ago because I wanted to exercise my right of free assembly, which is protected in New York State by our Constitution and I think also by the First Amendment. I want to say briefly, I find most of the arguments against fusion lacking, even though we have friends on both sides of this debate. The only one that I find cogent is the one that basically counts the numbers and says that if we outlaw minor parties and make it illegal to gather together to assemble as a political party, that the pain it will cause Republican candidates will hurt more than the pain it caused Democratic candidates. And while I find it reasonable, because I look at numbers, I also find it to be the most un-American argument that I could think of, because we don't like what people think or we don't agree with them, we're going to outlaw their ability to participate in the political process. And I think that, of course, I want to protect my right to do so, but I think as an American first, I would respect anyone's right to do it, even if I don't agree with their agenda. With a minute and a half, I think I'll read a little bit from both of these statements. This is from Stephanie Kinzia, who's currently running for Niagara County Legislature. I've been registered Independence Party member since 2007. In February, I announced I would run for the Niagara County Legislature, District 2. I did not have to feel the pressure to change my political party to enter this race. If it wasn't for the support of other party lines, I would not have this opportunity to try to represent the residents of my county. As I door knock, I am hearing more and more that people are feeling disconnected from either of the two major party lines, as many of them feel they are moving towards the extremes. I'm currently endorsed by the Independence Party, Democratic Party, and Working Families Party, and it has been a wonderful experience sharing with the voters how it is possible to work with different lines and different parties to have their support helping to make me a stronger and more competitive candidate while I still remain a member of my party. And then from my colleague, Jeremy Gold, who's also a state committee member, as I am now, he writes, I am a general partner in JIA, a New York State-based new media firm. I work regularly with colleagues in Western New York, and I wanted to weigh in to oppose the efforts to curtail fusion voting in New York State, which goes way beyond the brief of this commission. I'm distressed, along with many of the New Yorkers, that the original intent established this commission to get big and bad money out of politics and eliminate so much of the rent seeking that goes with it, was given another task to eliminate, unfortunately, to eliminate fusion voting. And with that, I'll thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Ms. Alcover, and next is David Mangello. Mangello? Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Jumeirah Alcover Ramirez, and I'm a graduate student at Medaille College here in Buffalo, pursuing a master's degree in organizational leadership. Aside from that, I am an alumni from neighboring school, Buffalo State, and I am a youth member of Uptown Progressive Action. So, I hope to run for office someday, and I support public financing of elections with a 6-to-1 small donor match and lower contribution limits, so that I and candidates who look and think like me have a fair chance to represent our communities. I was born and raised in Washington Heights, Manhattan, is a community in New York City, and I care about issues that impact our community members, many of whom are low-income immigrants and people of color. We have had enough of being ignored. Why is it that we are underrepresented? Why are our voices not heard? Big corporate donors and their priorities dominate our politics. The donor class is predominantly wealthy, white, and male. They use their money and influence to elect candidates who do not represent the interests of people like me and my family. I care about tenants' rights, homelessness, unfair policing, healthcare, mental health, equity in education, the cost of higher education, fair wages, and mass incarceration. Small donor matching, the lower contribution limits would amplify the voices of the underrepresented, like me and my community, and will go a long way to decrease the influence of big money. Let's make New York State famous for its democracy and not its corruption. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, David, and then after that, Joseph Kissel.
Hello, my name is David Mangello. I'm a candidate for Niagara County Legislator, and I'm an elected committee person, a position that a lot of people don't know even exists. The committeemen and the precinct captains and the judicial delegates, people really need to look into that because that's where the power comes from. It's really the grassroots of our system. Thank you all for allowing me to speak. I was just notified of this yesterday, so I'm not really prepared. I have a website called wakeupnewyork.net. I try to educate people. I teach people how to run for office. I teach people how to deal with the Board of Election, prepare petitions, and so on and so forth to get a fair election out there for people. But I'm a victim of this party fusion. I know many victims of party fusion. I'm a registered conservative. I used to be on the Republican committee in Niagara County. But once I saw the status quo and how they're manipulating the party committees by putting their friends and families in it to control the endorsements, you see that you cannot get a fair candidate on the ballot, even in a large party, depending on what goes on. There's virtually no accountability. It's one of the laws I support is to prevent family members or people connected to a system to get on a party committee. How fair is it for a elected official to be on a party committee that decides the endorsements of office? It's unethical. It's not right. You talk to people, they say that that's just not right. That shouldn't happen. Very interesting quote here. However, political parties may now and then answer popular ends. They are likely in the course of time and things to become potent engines by which running ambitious and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which had lifted them to unjust dominion. This is George Washington's farewell address. Washington is warning the American people against the negative impacts the opposing political parties could have on this country. And he was right. We tried getting a lot of people involved, but it wouldn't work. For example, one of the cases, we had a retired sheriff deputy. He was a Republican. The Republican Party wouldn't endorse him. So he primaried, lost the primary, but in the general election, the Democratic Party endorsed him. So he beat him Republican versus Democrat, but the minor party lines pulled enough votes because of that, because the Republican Party has invaded the Niagara County Conservative Committee and the Independence Committee. Their friends and family. Mike Norris was just here saying how he doesn't want this law, yet I have conservative petitions right here that shows Mike putting his family members in the conservative committee so the Republicans can control the endorsements of the parties, and they've done the same thing with the independents. This has to stop. This is like the third or fourth time I've run for office, but I can't win because of this process. I can go on, but I'd like to talk to you more in the future about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Joseph Kissel and then Jerome Shad. Is Jerome here? Okay.
Hi, my name is Joseph Kissel. I hope I can get through this in 3 minutes. I'm an independent journalist running as an independent candidate for a Niagara County legislature seat in my hometown of North Tonawanda. I'm here today not as someone with all the answers, but I do have a relevant story to share with you. The integrity of our election system is a nonpartisan fight that should be taken up by true patriots everywhere. As an independent journalist finishing up his first political campaign, I can tell you the following are the biggest issues facing an independent candidate in our political process. The overemphasis of money in established political parties, especially the dominant ones. The lack of individuals and the underemphasis of issues. In the end, local politics is a popularity contest, and when such a sacred institution is reduced to such a simplistic state, of course the next step is to game the system for you and your party's best interest. That happened to me at least twice that I'm aware of during the course of my campaign. The first time happened at my Independence Party endorsement interview, of which I am a registered member, mostly because of the dream of creating a new political consensus that focuses on the needs of the people and not the parties. You can read all about it at NiagaraNewsSource.com, and the name of the editorial is The Independence Party of Niagara County is a Total Sham. Here's what you need to know. When I walked into that closed room with 8 people, I immediately recognized some of them as being intimate with the dominant political party in Niagara County. The others, I would find out later, all had connections one way or another through government jobs they had received or connections to friends and family. Out of the gate, I was lied to, attacked, and treated with utter disrespect for almost the entire proceeding. One of those actively involved is the current appointed city clerk of North Tonawanda, ostensibly a member of the Independence Party, but so thick with the dominant political party of Niagara County, he was given a job for which he was and remains unprepared, while the rightly elected city clerk was voted by an unseen figure pulling this string and many others. This is called party invasion, and it subverts the will of the people to have a political system that is honest and works for them and not for a party that seeks to own the minor lines by getting members of their own party to register in another one and effectively take it over. This is why the people hate politics and politicians. It's mostly games and a sham, and yes, they are doing it for their own personal gain and the small circle of friends and family that benefits from the government largesse. Needless to say, I didn't get the endorsement of the Niagara County, Independence Party, but I gained a lot of insight into just one way the system is currently stacked against independent candidates. The other example of the political fraud happened during my Working Families Party primary. After my second and final endorsement interview, I gained the endorsement of the Working Families Party, with our greatest area of agreement seeming to be in the area of election reform. Despite the backing of the party, mailers, and phone calls on my behalf, my opponent managed to find 36 party members to write in his name and take the line. Keep in mind, my opponent also has the Republican, Conservative, Independence Party, Working Families Party, and naturally the Libertarian.
If you could finish that sentence, please. Thank you. Jerome Shad.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing us to speak. I am here. I'm an attorney who does election law work. By way of disclosure, I represent somebody in one of the cases where all of you are defendants. I am not here to debate the law or the case or any of that. I'm here because I'm a town chairman, and for almost a decade now, I've had to try to recruit people to run for office. I like good people to run, dedicated people. It's public service. But there are two barriers to people running. The first is money. I live in the town of Amherst, a wealthy community in this Erie County. It is still a barrier to get into the election process. I support the campaign finance reform effort, and I hope you succeed at that effort. My one item that I will leave with you today is focused on the other barrier, and that is fusion voting. And I want to clarify what I'm talking about. It is the fact that in New York, we allow a person's name to be on more than one line on the ballot in one election. That should not be the case. People come to me with my values and say, I'm a strong Democrat, I want to support these things and run. And then I have to tell them the reality, the very things the last speaker mentioned. We have this crazy thing we call fusion voting, where you need to get your name on more than one line, even on lines where you don't agree with the principles of that party. It is an absurdity, and it breeds corruption. It's the corruption of having friends and family in all the minor parties. That's what the major parties have to do, and vice versa. It is a system that is corrosive. I have an example I'll put in the papers, but I'm not going to talk about, where I see that it even infected a judicial nominating convention, because there is this need to be on multi-party lines and an incentive, a need to find a way to get the candidates on more than one line. If voters go in, they want to decide on the person and their ideals. The two biggest flags of that are what is the party and what is the person. They can make those decisions if they say they prefer the Working Families Party over Democrats, fine. Conservative over Democrats or Republicans, fine. Green Party over any of them, fine. I look for the day where instead of 2 candidates on 6 lines, we have 6 candidates, and my voters in Amherst get a choice the same way they should have every single time. And I don't have to explain to the next potential candidate why they're not allowed to have that choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron Siegel. Is Aaron still with us? Christine Wood. Christine? Okay. Ms. Martin, you're about 2 people away.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me here today. My name is Christine Wood, and I'm here today on behalf of Public Citizen, a national nonprofit organization that works to amplify the voices of people through advocating for policy changes that remove the corrosive influence of money in our political system. I'm also here as a lifelong New York resident who sees public financing as key to creating a more responsive and smarter public policy. For too long, we've seen big money interests stand in the way of progress, both at the national and state level. Our political system is dominated by a few wealthy individuals and big industry that spend millions of dollars in order to advance their political agenda. While our elected officials are incentivized to spend their time dialing for dollars, we will remain to have a system that drowns out the voices of the public and continues to prioritize the special interests. Recognizing the extent of the problem, House Democrats prioritized democracy and campaign finance reform earlier this year by passing H.R. 1, the For the People Act. H.R. 1 is the most comprehensive democracy reform bill passed through the House to date. In addition to breaking down barriers to voting, H.R. 1 would curb corporate dominance on our political system by amplifying the voices of everyday people through implementing a nationwide small donor matching system. H.R. 1 specifically outlines a 6-to-1 public match for every dollar raised in small dollar contributions, which they define as under $200. While we've seen the other public financing programs implemented across the country, New York would be the first major state to implement a small donor matching program on a statewide level. We need to ensure that we get this right. We have the ability to be a model for the nation so that the country has a path to transition away from a system dominated by big money into a system that ensures that everyday people are being represented. I urge the Commission to make bold and smart choices to ensure that a functional system produces the change intended. We need a 6-to-1 match to ensure that small donors have an incentive to participate and that their voices will truly be heard. We need to lower contribution limits. Not only do we need to boost the voices of everyday people, but we need to end the unfair advantage of excessive wealth. We also need to ensure that this program covers the primary and general elections and enables incumbents and candidates with grassroots support to participate. And lastly, we need to focus on reforms that strengthen and advance our democracy, which is why I urge the Commission to focus on public financing and not fusion voting. Thank you for holding this hearings. Your decisions in this process will not only determine the fate for our elections here in New York, but will determine the trajectory of our nation in terms of a campaign finance reform. Let's get this one right. Thanks.
Thank you. Next on the list is Phil Rumore. Ms. Martin is right after you, so if you'd like to do that, that's fine. Then you can go Ms. Martin and then Phil Rumore.
Hello, everyone. My name is Katrina Martin, also known as Katrina Martin Bordeaux. I happen to be a candidate for Erie County Legislator District 1. I received the Working Family Party endorsement. That was like one of the most humbling experiences of my life to actually be considered by them. Like they said, they had a vigorous endorsement process, and I'm glad that I made the grade. With that being said, I ran my petition. I'm a very skilled petitioner. If you go to the Board of Election, I'm probably at this point one of the most skilled. I turned in about 1,350 signatures. I only needed 350 to make the ballot. We also pulled together a team, and I qualified for that Working Family Party line. Lo and behold, I was extremely disappointed. I'm a lifelong Democrat, and I knew that that's what I was since I was 13 years old. I had the right to participate in this election, and that's what I did. Well, lo and behold, I get a letter in the mail that an opportunity to ballot was opened up, that my own party tried to roll me and knock me off that line. It didn't matter how much work I put in. It didn't matter if you cannot look around Western New York right now between 2013 and right now and not see my progressive footprint and policies that we have gotten off. So let's take this back to 2017, where this fusion issue comes up in Buffalo again. It comes up in relation to county races where the sheriff race was up, the county clerk, and the county comptroller. We have a problem in Erie County, though we are 2-to-1 on Democrats in taking those county-wide seats. And that's when fusion voting came up again, right? So instead of us taking a step back and looking at our leadership and seeing why are we 2-to-1 in the county, but we cannot seem to get our base out to vote, when we look at that C line, which is a conservative line, and we've seen it as something deadly. That's when this came up again, because I was in that original conversation. And when we lost that sheriff race, that was the same thing that I was thinking. We need to get rid of the fusion vote, right? Because I was in my feelings about a race that was important to me that I knew that we needed to win. In hindsight, when I turned around and I looked back and I called it for what it was not fair. It was not fair to then come after another party line and try to take them out because we cannot motivate our base to get out and vote with us in countywide elections. That's what's happening here in Western New York. That's what happened in this county, and that is the issue. The issue is, instead of us trying to change the constitutional law of fusion voting, maybe we need to look around and maybe we need to change who our representative is, and that would be Jeremy Zellner, our Democratic chair. That's where the weakness lies. It lies in people like Jeremy that walked over to me while I was sitting over there taunting me and left out.
Thank you, Ms. Martin.
Keep the fusion voting.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Mr. Rumore?
Thank you. Welcome to Buffalo. My name is Phil Rumore. I'm the president of the Buffalo Teachers Federation. I'm also one of the founding members of the Working Families Party. I guess the chairman of the Democratic Party isn't here, but I'd ask him, what are you afraid of, Mr. Zellner? It appears to me, in my opinion, there is but one reason that those who want to eliminate fusion voting, there is but one: the desire for dictatorial control. Those who seek to eliminate fusion voting want to be the sole deciders of who is elected by the people, thereby taking away the vote of all the people to make a decision on who becomes their representative. Rather than the voices of all the people being heard in elections, there would be the dictators who would seek to divide and conquer so that their selected candidates are elected. This is nothing less than an assault on democracy and the democratic process. In our government, when legislation is voted upon, the members of all parties vote and have their votes counted together, not by party. I submit to you that fusion voting is basic to our democratic system of allowing all the people's votes to count. It is democracy in action and essence, is to have everybody's vote count. Eliminating fusion voting allows for the would-be dictators to prevail. You cannot allow that to happen, and I believe you will not. And I'd like to really, truly thank you for your attention to this, what I consider important democratic principle, and that's having the votes of everybody count. Everybody, not just one party or another party, but everybody's vote count for their representative. Thank you again, and welcome again to Buffalo.
Thank you, Mr. Rumore. The next two people would be Richard Lipka and Scott Belusky.
Not today, but sometime after I answer all this. Not today. Just because you're before.
Good afternoon. My name is Richard Lipka. I am a registered voter of the Working Families Party. And I'd like to give you the psychological foundation for fusion voting. One of the foundations of intellectual development and moral development is choosing wisely after thoughtful consideration of the alternatives. If you do not have alternatives, then you cannot think about it thoughtfully, and you cannot make choices. So there is strong reason in terms of our development as human beings and our going forward as functioning human beings in a democracy to have fusion voting. The other little addendum I would like to add, based on what I heard this morning, I would really like some of our political leaders to unpack this high tax rhetoric. How many of you in here pay a sales tax of 9.5% on every grocery item? I lived in a state where that was true. How many of you this past year paid $1,500 to get license plates for a year. I have done that in the past. There are taxes, and then there are taxes. But to just globally use a phrase, highest taxes, that is filled with lots of baloney. But then again, many of our politicians are filled with lots of baloney. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Belusky? Am I saying that right?
Belevsky was close.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Scott Belevsky. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. For the last 20 years, I've held elected and appointed positions in the public sector, as well as being an attorney in the private sector. My family's been involved in leadership positions in both major parties. Respectfully, we don't always get along. When running for elected office, I've run with and without the support of minor parties. I didn't and don't care for fusion voting, but it was the political reality. In my opinion, minor parties should stand on their own. They generally rely on major parties and candidates to do the work of the minor parties, from obtaining petitions for minor party committee members to fundraising. Based on my experiences, minor parties themselves can be extremely undemocratic, with their chairs controlling their parties as little fiefdoms and exerting power disproportionately to their actual enrollment. Minor parties are akin to a minority shareholder in a closely held corporation. By way of example, consider that the major parties each control 49%, and a minor party can control the other 2%. The two major parties then do whatever they can to influence the minor party, be it with fundraising, political petition campaigning, or other back office help, effectively subverting the electoral process with their disproportionate power. At the end of the day, minor parties bring about the worst in the political process through fusion voting, not in the parties themselves, not when they stand up with their own candidates, but through fusion voting. I wholeheartedly recommend the abolishment of fusion voting, and I thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Next up, we have Eugene Hart, and then after that, we have Jennifer Hibbett.
Good afternoon. I'm Gene Hart. I'm a candidate on the Working Families Party for West Seneca Town Supervisor. I did have a prepared text, but most of that's been covered. So I think I'm just going to talk to you real briefly about myself as the poster child supporting both fusion voting and election reform for financing. Fusion voting, of course, has allowed me to stay in the campaign in West Seneca, New York, and it's become a much more, it's a vibrant give and take process that we're going through right now. We've had, for example, two debates with all three of the candidates involved in those debates. Now, that being said, that's why I support fusion voting, because it gave me the opportunity to stay in the race. I support campaign finance, mainly because I'm fortunate that I can finance my own race, and I've done that. We have a very robust media campaign, advertising campaign, and we're doing very well. We're making a difference. We're presenting our case for what we believe in. And of course, that's an important issue. If it were not me as the candidate, it's very unlikely that another nominee of the Working Families Party would be able to afford what I'm doing. Campaigns, as you know, are extremely expensive. For example, I believe my total, I don't even know what it is right now, is probably $30,000 for the town of West Seneca. 45,000 people live there. All right? But because I'm able to self-finance, which I have done, for example, our media campaign had 59,000 hits on the type of videos that we're putting out. So campaign reform is very essential, especially for minor party candidates. I'm also hoping that that there is no change in, for example, the number of votes required to be qualified as a minor party. I think 55,000 statewide is just fine. If you increase that to 250,000, then many of those minor parties, like the Working Families, would be eliminated. And I think it's very important that we don't do that, that we maintain fusion voting as it is, and that we seriously look at finding a fair way to finance minor party candidates who choose to run. Thank you.
I just have a quick question. You're running for office currently. What lines are you currently on?
I'm on the Working Families Party alone.
So you're not making use of fusion voting right now. You're just on the.
I was the Democratic endorsed candidate. I lost the primary. Because of fusion voting, I was able to stay in it. And as a result, we have a very interesting and robust campaign going on in our town right now. And that's the only reason I am on the Working Families at this point.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Jennifer Hibbett? Did Jennifer leave? Jennifer, okay. Terrence McKinnon? Terrence, going once. Okay. Greg Olma? I'm batting 1,000. Jenna Piasecki? You got it right. Thank you. You're here and I said it right.
Hi, my name is Jenna Piasecki. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm proud to be a citizen of New York State, which I feel strives to be a small d democratic as possible. I was overjoyed to hear that public campaign finance is on the table, as I believe it will make our state more small d democratic. I was then quickly heartbroken to hear that the commission's overreach in was heartbroken to hear about the commission's overreach in affecting fusion voting. I grew up on a small organic cattle farm in Colden, New York, in the South Towns of Buffalo, New York. I'm the daughter of 2 proud union members, a public school teacher, and a construction worker. I've been voting on the Working Family Party line since I was 18, as I trusted that their choices were in my best interests. Fusion voting enhances and expands democracy in New York State. It has kept me engaged in politics, and even at very busy times in my life, I've been able to show up and vote in elections without significant research, as I strongly trust the WFP's endorsement process. We need to make it even easier for citizens of New York to take part in the democratic process, not harder. New Yorkers don't want to feel like we are spoiling or wasting our votes voting for third-party candidates. Fusion voting allows for a large range of candidates, ideals, and representation in the great state of New York. Growing up in a very conservative rural area and then living my life as an adult, as an attorney in a metro area, I've seen how vast the political views are in New York State, even within Erie County alone. We need a more flexibility than a centrist 2-party system. Please leave fusion voting untouched and focus on the task at hand, public campaign finance. Thank you.
Thank you. And last, we have Jim Anderson. You're the winner.
We can make, if you give them to us, we'll make copies and distribute it later if you'd like.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
You send one down, I'll send it out.
Oh, there's the clock, right? Okay, let me get where I can see. My name is Jim Anderson. I'm a concerned citizen and a voter. And I'm in my 50th year anniversary of returning from the battlefield in Vietnam, where we were fighting for democracy, and now I'm here today joining a democracy fight again. Greetings, commissioners. The appointing of this commission has the opportunity to achieve the original rationale and intent for its creation. That being to establish for New York State a public campaign financing system that provides and ensures everyday New Yorkers have a voice in the political process by eliminating the unfair, shameful influence of money contributed by wealthy donors. Additionally, it could be a model for the nation. For far too long, election campaignings in New York have been paid to play and obstructed to New Yorkers having true representation that's responsive to the people rather than to wealthy donors. Quite honestly, it's difficult to put trust in this commission. But I'm keeping hope that this commission doesn't fail in keeping its charge to establish a public campaign financing system that works for all New Yorkers. However, some actions thus far cause serious concern for we the people about the commission's integrity. Your focus should be on public financing of elections as you were commissioned to do. Thus, you should leave fusion voting off the table. Fusion voting is a constitutionally protected voting right and irrelevant to public financing, as well as a distraction for this commission. You members of the Public Financing Commission should be concerned and not allow this commission to be used for political purposes to undermine the constitutional rights of we the people. To be clear, the integrity of this commission is in question, as you have already flip-flopped on what will be matched as it relates to in-district and out-of-district donors. You agreed to match both, then after questionable circumstances changed to only in-district to be matched. The match change makes it hard to get funding. If you can't have out-of-district donors match, it actually deters candidates from using the system. Thus, all you create is an incumbents protection program. Administering an independent campaign finance system should not be added to the duties of the Board of Elections. We need a fully dedicated entity. I must say this as I close. Mr. Jacobs, I have to ask you to stop your Trump-like behavior. Stop and desist from making accusations without putting forth evidence. You say your proposals were aimed to reduce voter confusion and rooting out corruption among sham parties that trade their ballot lines for political favors, but you did not specify which parties you were referring to. You said a lot of people have been getting away with an awful lot for a long time. Mr. Jacobs, you said, in my mind, it will be better overall if elections are run with only really credible parties. Your comments reflect a diabolical, questionable sense of your role and threatens the rights of New Yorkers. Every one of the issues we care about in this state is shaped
Mr. Anderson?
by the outsized presence of big money.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Anderson, if I might for a second, I just want to
Yes, you may.
respond. Thank you, sir. First of all, I thank you for your service in Vietnam. And second of all, I'd like to just say to you that as it references me, I would simply say to you that I have made mention of which parties I'm referring to as sham parties. And the Working Family Party was not one of them, nor, frankly, was the Conservative Party. There are parties in the state of New York, the Independence Party, things like Women's Equality Party, things like the Stop Common Core, which became the Reform Party, the SAM Party. These are all entities that have reached the 50,000 threshold and that I've referred to. And I have the evidence that indicates what the problems are. You've heard some of it in some of the hearings here today and in other hearings around the state. And I'll be happy to present that. Different than Mr. Trump, I actually will present and lay out what the problems are. But I want to make this final statement. I'm going to be very brief. I'll make a statement about all of this at our meeting on November the 13th. It'll be far more comprehensive. I want you to understand, and everybody to understand, that unfortunately, this whole issue has been distracted by some battle that I didn't know I was in with the Working Family Party, and some battle that maybe some other public official might be in with the Working Family Party that I have nothing to do with. What I am looking for everyone to do is to address this issue one way or another on the merits, the true merits of the argument, and I'll be presenting whatever information I have, and I appreciate your bringing it up, and I appreciate your position. Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
I thank you for your response. That's why I say off the table. Just deal with campaign financing system right now. No, don't deal with the fusion voting. That's not your job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. So having none others, that concludes our hearing, public testimony part of our hearing today. Thank you all for coming.